This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, non-stop Leafs talk starts now.
Presented by PointsBet Canada, it's the Thursday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill with you to talk about the Leafs and the Kraken. I mentioned yesterday the All-Star Game roster announcements coming on Thursday night, so we'll have full reaction to that coming up tomorrow. We'll talk about the Atlantic Division today as well in the standings. I can't believe we're approaching the midway point already of this season, Rosie. What's happening, buddy?
How are you, dude? Yeah, it's flying by. I'm just driving my first coffee into me after watching the World Jays last night. It was
oh, buddy,
starting off a little scary, and then holy shit, eh?
I'm fired up though because I down 2-0 in that game. I hit the Canadian money line at plus 172, so I feel good about that hit. But man, those two nations are incapable of playing a boring hockey game. I don't care what level, what gender. You always know it's going to be tremendous.
Yeah, it is. It's become like they've really stepped up, I think, in our lifetime in the last 15 years, competing with Canada and really developing their program. And, a few years there, we had to watch them get the gold medal. And it's like they're right there. And lots of other countries have really stepped up too. And it's kind of it's more hectic as a Canadian hockey fan, but it's a better tournament overall. And there's just really good competition out there. And yeah, there's no question the Canada-US rivalry is very hot. And I was coaching a couple of hockey games last night, so I had to keep looking at my phone. I was like, we're down 2 Cobb. Are you kidding me? And I was pretty choked, and then ran a couple practices and came out. It was 4-2. So I ran home and caught the second half of the game. So wicked result. And it's nice when that stuff happens, man. I always kind of forget about that tournament coming into Christmas and everything else. And then all of a sudden after New Year, it's just like, let's go. And you get all fired up about it. So it's a nice thing to get jazzed about in early January.
It is. And this time of year always brings back memories for yours truly. I was so fortunate to be at the World Junior in 2009. Eberle scores that goal. I was like 10 rows away. I was there for that crazy bonkers game against the States where it was 3-0 Americans. JT got a hattie, I believe, in that game. That tournament was next level. But I tell you, watching this tournament has brought the feels back. And maybe it's because I think for the first time, pretty much, we have a full crowd back in the mix. This tournament's not taking place in August. And I think the theater is amazing. And you coach kids, you play junior. I think the element of surprise, I think if you watch an NHL game, Rosie, they're not as prone to making mistakes. You watch junior hockey, you watch that Canadian team specifically for the first half of that game last night. They look tentative. They look nervous. Like it's such a different atmosphere. And that's why I always rag on analytics. You can't quantify that type of pressure in a hockey game, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's big. Like those guys, they're all used to being the big dogs, and it's kind of, I don't want to say easy for them, but they're the big boys on their team back home in junior or whatever, or else some of them are playing in the NHL. So to go back to that, and exactly, there's a mistake. It's like watching college football compared to the NFL. It's just different. They're prone to make mistakes. There can be big swings, and you're watching those kids, and when they're playing for medals and you get into those quarters and those semis, they're fired up and they realize what it means, and they get a little bit tentative, and both sides, you don't know what's going to happen. And it's not the NHL where they've been coached up for months on end to play certain systems, and they're just out there kind of winging it, playing together for the first time. And it leads to a lot of fireworks, man. And it's good watching. That's no doubt about it.
I was watching last night. They have to make fighting allowable. I mean, you can do it in junior. I know you can't do it in college, but like these fuck you matches are hilarious to me. It's like we all know, everybody in the building knows nothing's going to transpire. If you add some fighting in it, it could be a bit different into the mix,
Can you imagine like the IIHF is just so fucking soft, and all of the calls and everything are so bad, and it's the softest that you can play. They just like it that way for whatever reason. Then all of a sudden you add dusting into the mix, man, it would be mayhem. There'd be line brawls all the time, but just maybe you keep it like same rules like NHL, where you can't have 2-man in and you get kicked out and you got to watch yourself. Yeah. But when that big heat comes in, if those guys shed them, I just can't see them allowing 17, 18-year-olds to bare knuckle fight at this point in time. But that would be wicked.
Oh, it would be phenomenal. Imagine the States and Canada going at it toe for toe, scrap for scrap. Oh my goodness, just don't get me going. Remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. I'll have a game preview coming up in about 30 minutes from now, so stay locked for that. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, drop us a line down here on the YouTube chat. We'll get to that in a bit. But first, let's get over the boards. I love this. Release the Kraken for the third time ever. It's the Leafs and the Seattle Kraken. This one taking place at Scotiabank Arena. Toronto took both meetings last season, but a much different Kraken team, I would say, in year two than year one, Rosie.
Yeah, it seems that way. I haven't been following them or watching them besides the games the Leafs have played against them, but they seems like the expansion draft is pretty solid, and it gives a team a chance to win right out of the gate, obviously with Vegas and the success they've had, and they're continuing to be right out of the gate a good franchise. I think people don't like that sometimes. It's like, hey, you should earn it a little bit and be a basement dweller for a little while, but I just don't think the league's interested in that. And it's nice to have teams come out and contend right away. But as you say, the Kraken kind of middle of the pack right now, and I felt they're a stronger team at the beginning of the year, and they seem to be slipping a little bit. But again, you look at their record; it's not much different in a tough Western Conference than the Leafs are right now, and I think it's going to be another good test. And I don't think they're going to have a lot of games, going down the stretch where you can take a night off. Like, all these points are valuable, and we're going to see what happens. And I think Matt Murray's going to be in, so hopefully he solidifies himself as being the starter again tonight.
Yeah, so Matt Murray has been confirmed as a starter, as you nailed it right there. And I think, to me, the biggest difference with this Kraken team this year is that they can actually score goals. They were sixth in offense, or they are sixth in offense this year, 28th last season. So they've been outscoring their problems a bit more. I think they're still inconsistent when it comes to goaltending. We'll see if it's Martin Jones tonight, but even Grubauer hasn't had a good season. Jones has been probably the better of the two so far. Grubauer has been a bit banged up, but that's the biggest difference I've seen in Seattle watching the NHL the way I have and do this season too, is that they can score much more. So, I think the Leafs better be prepared, but I think both of us are expecting a much better defensive game. I was taking a peek at the over in this game, and maybe famous last words, but it's been trending that way for a while for this Maple Leafs team. So I wonder if there's a bit of a response defensively tonight, Rosie.
I hope so. That was my problem there with the Leafs last game. It just seemed like they were just not paying attention to that again. And it's been what's impressed me probably the most this year after October is when, they have that huge team buy-in, defense first, and the forwards are buying in big time, and the turnovers are hardly there at all. And they're really shutting the door and playing that really well-rounded game that I think is going to work really good in the playoffs. And they were just lost there on Monday or whatever their last game was. It was it was reverting back to some of the stuff of a year or two ago where you're trying to win by 6-5, and that's kind of what it was. And I hope they tighten that up. And it doesn't make sense. It's an anomaly to me because Morgan Riley's back, their defense are healthy again, and all of a sudden your defense kind of is negligible. I don't know if it's a mental thing with the forwards where, oh good, we got our boys back, we can go play now, and we don't have to worry about buying into that D zone. And I don't know if it's that, but it wasn't where it needs to be last game, and I hope they tighten it up tonight because they're going to need to.
Definitely will, and certainly a prevailing storyline in this game as Toronto gets set to play 9 of the next 13 at Scotiabank Arena. Mark Giordano revenge game. We love these. Kelly Yarncroke playing Seattle for the second time. Of course, both these guys went last year via trade, but Giordano was selected from Calgary in the 21 NHL expansion draft. He'll play the Kraken for the very first time tonight. Played 55 games for them in their inaugural season, Rosie.
Yeah, it's be nice for him to play them again. It's not, I don't see it as like him going back to play Calgary or something like that. But anytime it is, a former team, you're going to have money on the board and you want to show them, that you missed out. And I think any team that's ever had Giordano right now is wishing they had him on their team. An $800,000 player to provide what he does on and off the ice, I think is something absolutely anyone would take at this point in time. So I hope he puts it up their tailpipe tonight.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how that unfolds. But I think it's fair to say he's exceeded expectations so far in Toronto, right? I think especially when you look at that cap hit, you look at the body of work, the way he's elevated, the way he's played at his age, and what he means to this city. Like I think it's been a home run in terms of Mark Giordano and his fit with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Would you agree?
Yeah, he's one of my favorites on the roster for all those reasons. I mean, he's rock solid, he's steady, he's reliable. You can throw like throughout those injuries and stuff on the back end, you could throw like a new player, a Marlies player, or a inexperienced guy with him. And he can cover those holes or those mistakes and really support that guy and get his feet under him. I would love to play with him as a D partner. He's solid, he bangs, he blocks shots. Going back to where he jumped in there on what's his name, Konechny against the Flyers to kind of come to Matthews' rescue. He just kind of does it all, and I think he's kind of got that dad feeling in the locker room. Been around, won a Norris Trophy, and then you look at the analytics of this guy costs us $800,000 in the salary cap. Like it's just crazy. He's probably the highest value player that I can think of in the league, and I'm not a big cap cruncher guy or anything like that, but I just love him. I just love him on the roster and the cherry on top is his cap hit, So I've been super happy with him and love watching him, and I'm always cheering for him.
And again, too, what he brings in the room is a big thing to look at. You being the former player in the league, a guy, a veteran presence, has done it before, has won a Norris Trophy, he's won like it. There's so many different intangibles that I think a guy, and variables that a guy like Giordano brings to this roster, and you need that veteran presence. I know that conversation is overplayed in this market. I get it. The Marlows, the Thorntons of the world, the Simmonses of the world, but you need guys like this in the trenches. And especially a guy like Giordano, I still think has plenty to give in the NHL, which is crazy considering his age, right?
Yeah, usually when you get those kind of guys at that 40 mark, especially on D, it's like, they lose a step and they have trouble getting in position, and they kind of get walked by some 22-year-old with big jets, just blows his doors off. And, that happens every once in a while, and you kind of got to go, oh shit, he's getting old and he's losing a step. And I just don't see that with Gio. He's constantly in position, and he can keep up with these guys, and he outsmarts them, and he can just play on that back end really good. So, I think that he hasn't shown his age at all. And I don't want to say he's getting better because he won a Norris Trophy not too long ago, but he's taking that Norris Trophy caliber experience and he's implementing it amazingly here and filling a role that they need to. I mean, no one expects him to win a Norris Trophy anymore. That's past, but he hasn't fallen off the map by any stretch. I think he's a huge, huge component of their back. And if they lost him, I think there'd be a huge hole there.
Oh, without question. So we look now, Rosie, at the Atlantic Division standings, as mentioned, quickly approaching the midway point of the regular season, which is crazy. And we've talked about this almost ad nauseum when you look at this division specifically. Boston wins every night. I think it was great to see Tampa finally lose a game. Andre Vasilevsky was ill last night, so he didn't play in St. Paul, and they got destroyed by the Minnesota Wild. Brian Elliott plays back-to-back. But it's good to see separation and losses from these teams when you can see them. Boston, I believe, is in Los Angeles tonight, so we'll see on that front. But the Leafs need some help, and they're 9 points out of first, man. It's crazy. I think when you look at the body of work, they've had an exceptional season. Then you look at the standings, you're like, damn, they're still 9 points back of the Boston Bruins.
I know, it's like, I've been like kind of preaching, don't, like, why would you go through the season just thinking about the playoffs and, hey, this is these games are important and blah blah blah. And then lately I've been looking, just going like, it's going to be Toronto Tampa again. It's just it's not, it's almost set in stone. Like how do you catch Boston when they're doing what they're doing? And I don't think anyone's catching fire below. And it just looks like it's going to be that. So when that happens, I'm kind of like, well, what the hell? Let's just fast forward to playoffs and see what we can do here. But I would prefer not to play Tampa. Just I feel like this team, this Maple Leafs team, it just has bad mojo. And when you say, they've had their qualms in the playoffs recently, obviously, and to play the Arizona Coyotes and constantly drop points, it's like something in their head. And to go and play the Lightning again, I could feel like it could be in their head a little bit. Vasilevsky shuts the door. He's probably the best goalie in the world. you just don't want to go up against that in the playoffs. So I really wanted them to play somebody else and have a new look, but it just doesn't look like it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, it's fascinating on that front. Certainly, I think when you look at some of these teams and how they stack up against the Maple Leafs and Boston, again, sometimes looks like a team of destiny. You wonder if this is the last dance for like a Patrice Bergeron. But I always say it, like to be the best, you got to beat the best. I don't care who they play in the first round, if it's Boston, if it's Tampa. Hell, the Buffalo Sabres have been on complete fire. They've won 7 of the past 8. After that hot start, Detroit has really come back down to earth the last little while. The Ottawa Senators playing much better. It's a really, really competitive division. I think along those lines in general, the Eastern Conference is way better than the Western Conference. But I think it gives you great preparation for the Stanley Cup playoffs.
It does, but looking at, the Maple Leafs, they have a specific thing going on where they just need to get through the first bloody round. And it would be nice to have a different look that doesn't have, skeletons in the closet. And I don't think they're going to get it this year, but there's no question. Like if you think you're a Stanley Cup contender, then you can't be scared of playing anyone in the first round. But I would just prefer, if I had my choice, they played somebody else just for a new look and a new chapter, and go blow the doors off the first round and then run into Tampa later, or whatever the case is. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It looks like it's going to be the same old deal as last year, and they're going to have to get through these guys to prove their worth. And I can't even think about them losing to Tampa again in the first round. It would just be devastating, man. And it's just, I know that I'm kind of new to following it to this degree right now with this team. And there's people that have, laid their hearts on the line for their entire lives and done nothing but get it stomped on. And, it's not a nice division to be in. It's like I said the other day, with the Jays having to be in the division with, Boston Yankees for so long there, it's just hopeless for a while. You can have such a good team and still not get it done. And, Toronto's had good enough teams to get to the second round. They've had better teams than teams that have gotten to the second round, and it just doesn't get done. So it's just a lot of pressure building it up. And I'm starting to feeling it now that it's the new year. I'm starting to feel this, like, holy shit, this can't happen again. And it's awful because those guys feel it playing for that franchise. And you don't want to go into the playoffs gripping your stick saying, holy shit. You want to go into it saying, bring on anybody. We are who we are. And you hope they have that feeling. But man, there's just those skeletons in the closet that kind of scare me, man. But I do believe in this team, and I think they've got what it takes. But at the end of the day, it's not up to you. When you watch those games, it's like we know they're better than this, and it just doesn't happen. And I think I'm feeling the frustration of Leafs Nation right now over the past few years, and really all you can do, you have no control over it as a fan. You're just sitting there hoping to hell, like, get it fucking done this year. And I think so many people following this team and caring that much is what makes it so much pressure on this team, man. So I don't know, I'm ranting a little bit, but it's just a scary time going to those playoffs. I want them to win so fucking bad and get that monkey off their back.
You've really changed your tune. I'm sorry to break it to you, but every team they play in the playoffs, they've had 4 different opponents and lost to 4 different teams in the last 7 years. Boston, Columbus, Montreal, Tampa, and I sat through all 4 of those fucking teams and those 4 series. So the Columbus one was a lot of fun because it happened in August during a world pandemic. The Montreal one as well was a lot of fun because it was 3-1 and they blew their fucking again. We're at a point with this Maple Leafs team. It does not matter what they do in the regular season. I bring this up at least once a show. I think they've been incredible. I'm fortunate enough to cover this team, and I think it's a lot of fun. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they will be judged. They'll be gauged on what they do in the springtime. It's just a reality. And I think it's just building blocks and a building process to get to that level. So with you, I'm excited. I'm also enjoying the regular season. Some of the personal feats. We know the All-Star game announcements are coming up tonight as well, and these guys deserve a lot of credit. They're an excellent regular season team, and I mean that with the dewest respect. I think they have to change that narrative, and I think along those lines, there's been a laundry list of teams that have been in that conversation too, like even ones that didn't get the job done, right? San Jose, Vancouver, every year, President's Trophy winners, every year, top of the class, couldn't push through. But then on the contrary, you look at teams like Washington and Tampa and others that did push through. So that gives you that level of optimism, I think, in Leafs Nation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, it doesn't matter what happened in the past. Like those teams
Yeah,
don't exist anymore. They just don't exist. That team doesn't
they're still
exist.
there.
So just because they just because they have the same goddamn logo on the front doesn't mean they're the
Oh, they're
same
still there.
team. Well, it's yet to be decided. But I just like when you chirp Dubas and you say this and that, it's like, well, what are you supposed to do? You're putting the best team you can possibly put on the ice. Look at the body, look at the core, look at the D, look at the goaltenders. Like, what the hell would anyone else do to make a
Yeah,
good hockey team than what they've done? Like, there's
yeah.
nothing else you can do there. They've put together a really good goddamn hockey team. It's better than the vast majority of teams in the NHL. And then you have a bad week where you get down 3-2 in the playoffs, and then holy shit, it's one loss away and you lose it and you're done.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to think that they just can't fucking break through. It has to be a mental barrier of some kind. It has to be some pressurized thing that just makes you grip your stick too tight and you can't do what you're used to doing. There's no other explanation for them not to be able to get through, especially in like the last 5 years when they've had solid top of the NHL type of teams and they can't win the first fucking round.
It's a fair question, right? Because you look at a team like the Florida Panthers, who pretty much in the offseason remolded what they want to look like, and they want to pattern their game after the team they'll probably play or likely thought they would play in the playoffs, and that's Tampa Bay Lightning. And look where Florida is, right? They're in jeopardy of missing the Stanley Cup playoffs altogether. So I think you make an excellent point on that front. And all you can do is just keep going back to the well. And I think eventually you either push through or you don't. I made the examples of teams that have had success finally and some that haven't. And I always like to bring up the name Steven Stamkos, right? He was a career loser pretty much for 10 seasons. And now he's going to go down as one of the best winners of his generation. Ditto for Alex Ovechkin. With that in mind, Rosie, the wrap up is brought to you by our friends at PointsBet Canada. So unfortunately, I took the L last night. I had the over in Detroit and New Jersey. I wasn't watching that game anyways. I was watching the World Junior game, but the number in that game hit at 6. It was a 5-1 final. The Devils blew the doors off Detroit. So I'm looking to bounce back into the win column tonight. Give me the puck line, the Maple Leafs puck line against the Seattle Kraken. I just like the value. As you see on your screen right there, it's already changed from when I looked at it a couple minutes ago. It's at plus 115. It was at plus 120 before. Regardless, I think I'm looking for a response from this Maple Leafs team. The Kraken had to fly cross country. They were in Edmonton on Tuesday. It's game 2 of 7 in a 7-game road trip for the Kraken. So I'm expecting a response. At the very least, I'm expecting a Leafs win. So why not by more than one?
Yeah, it's a good time to go puck line. I think, you know, all the points you just touched on, and I
Yeah.
expect a response too. I think they've been having a couple days of intense video, and they're breaking stuff down and seeing where they've been, you know, faltering a little bit. And I think they'll be ready to sew that up and sew those holes up. And you know, for the plus money that you're talking about against the Kraken, Matt Murray's in net. He's been really solid. I like the bet a lot, and I'm going to take it personally as well and see if we can get some plus money on the board.
Let's do it. And again, I would try to hammer that bunting line. They've been on fire. I think last I looked here on PointsBet Canada, the bunting shot prop is not up there. It's probably because I took all their winnings the other night. I'm just kidding. But that line in general has been producing. Maybe you look more at, you know, Mitch Marner needs 2 points to get to 500, becoming the second fastest Leaf in franchise history to hit that milestone. So maybe you look there. I think some shot props could be in play as well. But all in all, I expect a much different game in this one than we saw against the St. Louis Blues on Tuesday. But we've been proven wrong and right before, Rosie. So I'm just fascinated. We always like to bring up, it's a long season. You played through a grueling 82-game slate. You're not going to have it for bigger stretches of time. And that's the most curious thing for me. As I mentioned earlier, I was wondering about taking the over, but you would think logically the Leafs to be much better defensively, but who's to say they can't win this game like 6-2 again, like they did against Colorado on New Year's Eve?
Yeah, totally. I don't really have a feel. It's just weird playing some of those Western Conference
Agree.
teams where you don't get to watch them. You don't really know what their tendencies are. And I'll probably live bet it and look at, you know, who comes out of the gates, who's controlling the puck, you know, who's getting the chances, how Murray looks, get a vibe for what's going on, like how much control one team can take, and then jump on a live bet at that point in time is usually what I like to do, especially when you don't know the teams too well. But I just, I don't know, like with that Samsonov Murray thing, I think Murray's emerging as kind of being the starter right now at this particular time. But I mean, go back to like October, November. I mean, I was saying, this is great. We're doing the 1-2 punch thing, but one guy is gonna get a little bit cold and have a hiccup, and the other guy's gonna take over and kind of pick him up, and then someone's gonna get hurt, and the other guy's gonna come pick him up, and that's what's so great about having a 1-2 punch. And right now, Samsonov hasn't been stealing games or standing on his head. Okay, so now Murray can stand up and maybe play, a bigger percentage of the games than what they've been doing. They've been kind of switching off. Maybe Murray will take more of a stand rate now for a while and let Sammy work on his game, relax, and then come in, and hopefully when you do put him in, he can stand on his head and get that confidence back. But that's Toronto for you, man. Everyone's talking about the Samsonov, experiment has failed. It's like, what the fuck, man? If he was on any other team in the world, it would just be not even noticeable what's happening right now. It would just be like, oh yeah, like Murray's playing the best right now, so we're going to play him. Like, that's it. But of course it's Toronto, so you got to say, all the guys that were sitting on the sidelines and quiet as hell all throughout the season while these two guys are switch hitting unbelievable games, and you don't even know who you're going to play because they're both playing so goddamn good, and both numbers are unbelievable and both records are unbelievable, home, on the road, whatever. It didn't matter. It's like, look at our fucking goaltending duo right now. Everyone was pretty quiet about the transaction at that point in time. Now if Sammy has it's not even a skid, he just hasn't like won them the game the last couple of outings. I noticed people on Twitter jumping on him and, oh, here we go, I told you so. It's so pathetic. Like, if you're going to take a stand on something, then stay on the stand. Don't just jump. Don't just be a bandwagon guy where you're just going to follow the flavor of the week and say, oh, I knew that, and that's my take now. It's like, how easy is that? Don't be a loser, man. Have conviction in what you think. Do you think those two goalies are shit, or do you believe in them? I mean, I've been saying since the get-go that these two goalies it's a fantastic duo because you can switch hit and because you can ride one guy when the other guy is cold, and that's what's happening right now. And by no means does it mean that Samsonov is a blunder or a bad signing, or if he's shouldn't be there. He's just going to kind of let Murray take the reins for a while here is all it is in my mind.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a byproduct of the market. I think your assessment's bang on, and I think there will be a period later on in the season where they're running with Ilya Samsonov, and it's Matt Murray who's struggling, who's injured. I mean, who's to say that can't happen down the road? I mean, there's so many different variables that run through the course of an 82 game slate, and I think you're right on. I think at this point in time, I think you give the ball, so to speak, to Matt Murray, and you see the way he handles that. But I think you have to be fair and in sheltering him and insulating him and knowing his track record and resume and sprinkling in some Samsonov, like a back-to-back is coming up this weekend. But bottom line, I think the main idea here is to have both goalies fresh in time for the Stanley Cup playoffs, right? And feeling good about both the guys, no?
Yeah, it's funny though, like if they're both playing well and they're both healthy, how hard is that to figure out who you go with? You want to almost have a front runner. Like, I can't think of a scenario where a team's in the Stanley Cup playoffs and they don't know what goalie to play. There's always like, this is the starter. Who?
So do you remember the Washington Capitals when they won in 2018? Do you know who started that postseason run for them?
No.
It was Philip Grubauer. It was 2-0 in that series for Columbus, and then they started Holtby, and then they won in a magical run, won the Stanley Cup. So I know what you're saying, though. Like, it's got to be a mind fuck for teams when you don't know who's going to start at any given night when your season's on the line. And it's just a curious tap dance, in my opinion, when coaches, I don't know how they know to pull the strings, who they go to. Like, Boston's prime illustration of that. I know Allmark is 21-1-1, but they've been sprinkling in Swayman like every other start. It's a tap dance. And I think you're right. Like, there needs to be one guy that maybe pulls ahead a bit come playoff time.
Yeah, and I don't mind if Murray does that. He's the guy who's won Stanley Cups, and he's got the experience, and he's older. And if he's healthy, I don't mind them having a solidified, this is the starter, this is the secondary guy we have in the mix, especially coming into playoffs. I don't care what happens right now, but going into playoffs would be nice. I don't envy. I mean, ultimately, you want to have two good goalies that you can go to, and it doesn't matter. You just switch hit them. But if you do have that, I don't envy the coaching situation where, like, who do you play and, like, whose ego is getting hurt and and who wants to play or who's more comfortable taking a back seat. It would just be difficult. My approach would just be communication. Like, get those two guys in a room, be like, what are you guys feeling right now? And just honesty, let it come out. And they're both competitors and they're both going to say like, I want to be the guy and blah, blah, blah. But like, just get it on the table so that when you do say, hey, so-and-so, you're sitting tonight, we're going with this guy and we're going to stick with him because he's hot. Like, I just would like to have everyone on the same page and there not be any, well, what the fuck is this? You know, and that's the last thing you want is like tension within the coaching staff and the goaltenders. And I don't think they have that right now, but it's kind of funny. I love the switch hitting and be able to go to two different guys and both them be hot and equally as good. But come down the stretch in the playoffs, you kind of need someone to like be the go-to guy to actually start, right?
Bottom line, it is a business and something to monitor over the next little while as we head into the second half of this Maple Leafs regular season. Rosie, we'll leave it at that, and looking forward to tomorrow's show. We'll recap the Leafs and Kraken game and also look at the All-Star game roster announcement coming tonight. Which Leafs were left on, off the list as well, some snubs. We'll get into that conversation tomorrow, okay?
Right on. See you then, buddy.
All right, there you have it. That's Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Take care.